Hi, I'm Danny Black, and welcome to the @SportsBalt podcast. On this podcast, I will be talking sports cards, collectibles, memorabilia. I'll be interviewing hobby guests. I will be talking about my own thoughts. I'll cover regular sports that relate to the hobby. That's the fun part. More importantly, I want you along for the ride. So click like and follow for more content, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Well, hello. Welcome back to another edition of Sports Bolt, the podcast. And if you've never put it together, Sports Bolt is Sports Baltimore. That's where I'm from. So that's where Sports Bolt comes from. And I made a promise when I started this that I would be covering Baltimore sports on a regular basis. And I have been a little bit slacking in that the last couple of months. So I figured who to bring in but one of my good friends and one of the co-hosts of Inside Access on 105.7 Radio in Baltimore. Let me bring in affectionately known as T-Bone, but Tim Barbalace. How you doing, buddy?
Good. What's going on, Danny?
Nothing. I figure, we do this off air. We might as well hit record and have a little fun.
Yeah, why not?
So you do roughly how many hours a day Baltimore radio talking the topics I'm going to make you talk about even more?
Yeah, got a show coming up later today as well. So I'm on air 2 to 6 with Jason and Ken for Inside Access. And then since Orioles season ended second week of October, I've been doing Baltimore Game Day Daily, which is just a full 1 hour Raven show from 6 to 7 solo. So 5 hours of talking every single day, Monday through Friday, throw in some weekend shifts because I was a part of our Ravens pregame coverage with Vinny Serrato and Mike Preston for the 2 hours leading up to kickoff. So I guess
I got to tell you, I love Mike Preston.
Yeah. No, Mike's awesome, man. And Mike, look, I don't take for granted.
You and him were great. I forget if you had another host, but the two of you were great.
Yes. I don't take for granted, doing this at my age and learning from a guy like Mike, who has been covering the team ever since they came here in 1996, just kind of picking his brain and just learning how to create those relationships. Mike's definitely a good mentor.
And he doesn't lack for opinions.
No, he does not.
Yes.
No, he does not.
They say opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one. I think Mike was born with a couple extra, and he's very talented at what he does.
Yeah,
but it's hard to have that many opinions and still come across in person. He's a real decent guy.
No, he is. I mean, on air, off the air. I mean, quite frankly, he's the same guy on and off the air. This is the first year doing pregame with him, so I knew him before, booked him on the show a few times, but to actually work with him and, kind of learn him at that level, if you will, was pretty cool.
Sure. So you're doing 100 hours a week on air, and I'm assuming right now 99% of the callers want to talk Lamar Jackson, and 99% of the conversation. Are you guys tempted to veer in that direction and force yourself away from it, or is there other big headlines? I mean, obviously Super Bowl right now, but
sure. So we're kind of in that dead space of the year, right? Where the Ravens are out, pitchers and catchers report in a couple weeks, and then even at that point, once you get into the meat of spring training, then okay, there's a ton of storylines. We're getting a ton of different sound bites from guys in Sarasota, but from now until a month or so, this is the dead period. So we have to come up with different topics each day. We have a group chat, me, Jason, Ken, and Chuck and Stone. So we're always shooting ideas back and forth. But of course, the Lamar Jackson situation drives the boat. And I'm not going to lie to you, Danny, I'm kind of Lamar fatigued at this point. And we're not even close to a resolution with this situation because the franchise tag window that starts at the end of the month. So that's really going to start to ramp up things. Scouting combines at the end of the month as well. So you would think something's going to leak out of there one way or another. I'm sure Eric DeCosta is going to be working the phones. with different GMs and still trying to sign him long term.
So I'm going to spin this to a hobby question that I'm going to let you answer from a sports perspective. People who collect cards don't like uncertainty. They want to know free agency is like the worst thing in cards because nobody knows and everybody's scared. And, Russell Wilson could look like he's going to a great team. And, his cards were up last offseason. And this offseason, they were crashed. But now Sean Payton's there. So they go back up. I mean, super overreactionary. The card market is very similar to callers. It's one of the reasons that for the modern stuff, I love this parallel. Lamar Jackson's cards have gotten killed this year. And simply, I think from is that Lamar? Let him know.
No, that's not. I'm very professional, as you can tell, so I just silenced my phone.
No, are you kidding? Mine's on vibrate. Lamar owes me a call. So I just think it's interesting, that you have. I totally lost where I was going with that. That was great. I was talking about Lamar. Where was I going? I don't know. It was brilliant. Your phone threw me off.
Oh no! Well, are we good now? I see you.
Okay, there we are. So, did I lose you?
No, you froze up for a second, but we're good. We're back.
Okay. All right. So what I was saying is on the Lamar contract, people are burnt out, but the market doesn't like uncertainty. So from a timeline, can you give a rough timeline of the NFL offseason? Because you mentioned the tag, but the tag is only to grab possession. That doesn't guarantee they're on the team. So we have the tag in about a month. We're going to have the NFL draft. We're going to have free agency. So for people who want certainty, we are 3 months. Am I roughly correct? 2 months to most players being settled?
So in Lamar's case, typically speaking, the franchise tag and trade isn't commonplace in the NFL. It happens, but it doesn't happen often. So the franchise tag window, end of this month, and then it closes the beginning of March. I believe the league year starts March 13th. And then at that point, free agency hits, every team has to be cap compliant. So what makes it tricky for the Ravens, you give him an exclusive franchise tag that's $45 million right off the cap. So the Ravens are going to have to move quickly, get under the cap at that number. They're roughly $28 million under the cap right now. A lot can happen. But to your point, if I'm Eric DeCosta, I want to get something done. There's 2 deadlines for me. It's the beginning of the league year, March 13th. And if you don't get something done then you're effectively sitting out of free agency because you don't have the cap space. The other deadline, if you are going to deal him, is the draft. Because if you're trading him, you want draft picks this year. You don't want to worry about 2024. Now, you're going to get some future picks, but you want the immediacy of first-round pick plus in 2023. So you got to move quickly. If you realize that you can't come to terms for a long-term deal for whatever reason, it's got to be done. But those are the 2 hard dates for me. So I would say 2.5 months, less than 3 months, you would have certainty.
Okay, so for people who are watching this and want a little insight on the Baltimore market, if you do believe in Lamar Jackson, the player, and you're looking for the cards, it sounds like the next month or 2 is going to be the best time where his prices will still be low, where there could be uncertainty. I mean, listen, who knows with Lamar? He could sign a contract at 2:00 today and throw all of our day off. But in theory, the uncertainty will probably go through, I would say, another month, in my personal opinion. Now, let's talk about uncertainty in general with some other quarterbacks, and I'm going to hit you a little bit off guard. If I told you this year that Josh Allen's prices went down, would you say that Josh Allen had a disappointing year, or has the hype on all of these quarterbacks just gotten to the place if they don't win a Super Bowl, it's almost a disappointment, and they can't win a Super Bowl every year?
I think that's the issue, right? Where especially in this day and age, it's about championships. And it really has bled into every sport, but quarterback, most important position in the NFL. And you look at the guy that just retired, Tom Brady, with 7 championships.
Yep.
So he's kind of the top-notch guy. Patrick Mahomes, he's playing in his 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years. And Josh Allen, I was talking to Jason about this. I think we were doing this on air. Josh Allen only has 3 playoff wins. No, it was Ryan Ripken on Monday. He only has 3 playoff wins. And fair, unfair, I don't necessarily love the whole quarterback win, stat. It's kind of like pitchers win-loss record, which is meaningless. But was there a rough patch for Josh this year? Absolutely. I mean, he was turning the ball over at will in the red zone. He did suffer that elbow injury. You wonder how much that was bothering him. But I think we all went into this season with such sky-high expectations for the Bills in general. And, they had a nice record. They 2nd seed, but, getting by. Not a ton of blowouts. But all in all, I don't think Josh had a poor year by any means. I just think, like you said, it's the championship mentality of every single sport. Every single sport right now. When you think of so many great Hall of Fame players that never won a championship, it's kind of crazy.
Okay, so let's go rapid fire real quick, and I'm going to do this with you. And I'm totally catching you off guard. I'm just going to go down a couple quarterbacks, and we're going to say if we think that they are trending, it's just up or down. Okay, because I think going into last year, the up or down list was so different than where we are now. And I'll start with 2 guys that I say going into last year, most people would have said was a flip of the coin, and Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields. And I'm going to say clearly, I'll take the easy ones here. Hurts up arrow, Fields down arrow. You agree?
I mean, Hurts, you have to say up, right? Where no one could have seen the jump that he took this year. Now, Howie Roseman was extremely aggressive in building that team around him and getting A.J. Brown in, and he's in the Super Bowl, so he did pretty well. Justin Fields is such an interesting situation. I've had this conversation with some friends before. Justin Fields, to me, almost feels like what people thought Lamar was going to be. And I'm not.
You must be on the Fields family payroll.
No. I'm saying that in a negative. I'm saying
okay.
He's electrifying. He makes these fantastic plays, but the inconsistencies there. Obviously, the Bears are terrible. Who knows what happens to him? I mean, there's the crazy rumors that they could trade him and then take a quarterback number 1. I would definitely say down. I don't think you're going to get much of an argument out of me for him, but he just had such a weird year where he would make these crazy plays and then boneheaded turnovers to end the games. It was just odd.
I'm going to give 2 quarterbacks who, both because of injuries, you got to look at a little different. And I'm going to down arrow Kyle Murray and Tua Tagovailoa, if people think I can't say the last name. Tua and Kyler Murray, I think, are both down arrows on performance, almost irregardless of the injury. I know Tua looked good for a little while, but that's a freaking team around him. I wonder, how much were the wide receivers. I mean, if you give Lamar, the Miami wide receiving core, what would he look like? So I think Tua is actually overvalued. So I think he's a down arrow, and I think Kyler Murray's a down arrow.
Kyler's definitely a down. That's a dumpster fire in Arizona.
And that's what you get when you tell a baseball team that you're never playing football no matter what, and then you back out of it. Yeah. That's karma, by the way. Yeah. The Oakland A's first-round pick. Okay, yep. And he said to them he wasn't going to play football. So I just want to get that out there. Don't be a liar, people.
No, Kyler, look, dumpster fire organization in Arizona. They just fired their head coach. Their GM stepped away. They're going to be bad for a few years. DeAndre Hopkins is probably getting dealt. What do they do well?
And they got a lot of money in Kyler.
Exactly. As far as Tua's tough. Got a great team around. Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Mike Gesicki. I mean, phenomenal weapons around him. I am not, but God, man, he was having a hell of a year. But the thing that has him down for me is, and football, it's just the human element. 3 concussions. You can't help but worry about that guy, especially with how god awful their medical staff was, putting him back out there 4 days later after, they didn't think he suffered a concussion. And then that
It's an
Thursday,
embarrassment to a league that's in the middle and has been through lawsuits.
yes, it's insane, but I don't know, man. I mean, you just can't help but wonder if Tua has another one next year, what happens. So I just think more so for me, it's the health uncertainty for Tua, which is why I have him down.
Okay, last 3, and then I'm gonna circle back around to my original point. Up or down arrow: Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, and Justin Herbert in that order.
So I just hate Deshaun Watson the person. So I'm going to be a little,
I'll down arrow him the rest of his life. I don't care about
that's
football.
kind of where I'm at. I just think he's a total scumbag.
And he played like good
people.
Played like so any if you want to look at down arrow Deshaun Watson.
Yes, he played terrible.
Team Jacoby.
Yes, Team Jacoby. Who was the second one? I heard Herbert at the end. Russ was.
He looks like the beginning of the Drew Brees fall when he can't quite throw it the same anymore.
Yeah, I mean he's younger than Brees was at the.
And Brees had the surgery. I understand.
I hate to play the fence. I mean, I have to say down after last year, but this is a make or break year for Russell Wilson. If he sucks this year, he's done.
With Sean Payton.
Yeah, he's done. It's a wrap. Denver's going to have to eat that contract. I'm willing to see what he does next year. I mean, maybe this is a situation in your industry, Danny, where you could probably buy low as hell on Russ right now.
Look at Tim giving hard picks and 100% accurate. You are correct. If you believe in Russ and you believe in Peyton and you think people are going to look back at the beginning of his career and he has a chance to be, a Hall of Famer, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at with him. I mean, you can't help but say down, but this is one of the cases as opposed to any of the other guys that we've talked about. This would be a good time to buy. Not saying to go all in, but throw a little coin.
Absolutely.
Because he has weapons too. It's not like that team.
They've got receivers. People sleep on them.
It's not like they're bereft of talent. And that defense was great last year, despite how awful that offense was. Herbert, another tough one.
I know. To me, he's similar to Phillip Rivers, where the talent just outplays the success.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great way to put it. And he's got the unfortunate happenstance of being in the same division as Patrick Mahomes. And the Raiders, who knows what happens at quarterback for them. We already talked about Denver. God, that is the toughest call out of all of them. I mean, I'm a Justin Herbert guy. I do think Joe Lombardi was holding him back. Now that he's gone, Kellen Moore there is interesting. I like a diagonal up. I mean,
I like him better than the team.
Oh yeah, I mean the Chargers. They just have so much bad voodoo around them. Like it's just they charge her.
So I'm gonna bring this all back around.
Lamar.
All of our up and down arrows. Was there any correlation between the contracts and the up and down arrows?
I guess I'm starting to think. So Kyler was down.
Russ
was down.
Deshaun was down.
Sean down.
Uh, yeah, I mean, we got a lot of guys that haven't been extended, on rookie contracts, or were extended pre Deshaun that are on pretty cheap contracts relative to the market. So,
So here's the thing, and it's tough, and God knows we've talked about this ad nauseum on the fan. I say this all the time with quarterback contracts. It's not who's best, it's who's next.
and I agree with
And
you. But,
and
but does that have to hold true till the end of time when you have Deshaun Watson as the outlier?
I don't know. And that's kind of the line in the stand right now, allegedly, between the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. And there's no bigger advantage in sports than to have your rookie quarterback or a quarterback on your rookie contract playing at a very high level like the Ravens did with Lamar Jackson. And unfortunately, they did not maximize that 5-year window. But it's.
And is there something to be said that he has broken down near the end of a couple seasons now? I mean, at what point does the tag and trade really start to make sense? Because you just gave a great reason. If there's a tag and trade, we're probably going to end up with a quarterback who's not making the money that Lamar's.
Oh yeah, you're resetting the timeline.
Well,
now maybe you get like a veteran stopgap.
What if you get Davis Mills?
Dude, you mentioned
And-
Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby
Yes.
Brissett's a free agent. You don't have to give up any draft picks for him, and he wouldn't be that much. Really.
So, I just think, to your point, everybody's got to take a step back because whatever's in front of you is always shiny. And the right, I hate this quote, but right player, right price. And I usually roll my eyes when I hear that, but I think this is the one time it's never been truer because of what we just said. A bad quarterback contract will set back your organization years.
Well, they kind of lived through it with Joe, right? Where
look what the Ravens had to do. You had to suck it up and eat 1 year completely, and it took a little while to basically flip an entire roster.
Oh yeah.
So
it's just tough. I mean, I see both sides. I truly do see both sides. The injury thing is absolutely, but I will say this: getting the draft picks is nice. You got to hit on them, and that's far from a sure thing. And I think organization fans, we sort of neglect what happened prior to 2008, where they're in that quarterback wilderness, and it took them 12 years to find one for Joe Flacco. It's not easy finding that franchise guy. So you have the certainty. Now I get it. Like, I'm just presenting both sides. I mean,
I agree. I agree with you. I'm just saying I think Baltimore, well, rightfully so. The hometown team is always going to like the hometown players, but I don't think objectively that it's a sure thing. The best thing for the team is the largest, most recent contract. That's.
Well, I think something else is Joe Burrow. He's due for a contract extension. Justin Herbert is due for a contract extension.
So you got to beat them to the punch if you have a chance.
Correct. But if you don't, what if Joe Burrow gets that guaranteed deal? Then it's over. It's a wrap.
Well, there we are.
Yeah.
All right. Tim Barbalace announces he thinks Lamar Jackson should be traded. Okay. And
I think he will, but
professional transition there on good drafting. Orioles farm system and future moves. There are now, I believe, I've lost count, 8 official top 100 list. What's your dog's name?
Zoe.
Zoe, if Zoe wants to sit on your lap, you can have Zoe. We are dog friendly.
I think she wants to play with me. Here.
Or is she tired of talking about Lamar also?
Yeah, she's she's done talking about it too.
Okay, so I'm a diehard prospect guy. I'm a draft minor league geek and self-admitted.
Well, I'm going to throw this back at you real quick because no, actually, I'm off today because Jason and Ken we booked Kylie McDaniel.
Oh, sure,
And I'm sure you saw his list.
absolutely.
And Kate
Povich.
What was it? 56, 53. Like he was the only guy
Yes.
to have him and to have him up that high.
Yes.
You go to way more minor league games than me, so I wanted your opinion on that. Jason, he saw him his first start at Aberdeen, raved about him, said he was way too good for the league. I mean, obviously it was high.
Well, I'd like to say this publicly. Jason LaCanfora has fallen in love with every player he's ever seen at every level. So I love you, Jay, but they're not all gonna hit. No, but I like writers who are willing to dig a little deeper and say, it's funny, right before we went on, I was showing you an old list I did, and God, out of 15 guys, I think 2 to 3 turned out to be decent major leaguers, and they were certainly not the guys I had ranked at the top of the list. I like highly putting it out there. Is a certain amount of these top 100 lists clickbait? Sure.
Yeah.
Does Keith Law know that when he leaves off Colton Cowser that he's going to get a lot of Baltimore fans that are going to click to complain? Of course he does.
Yeah.
And then you'll have sites like Baseball America or MLB Pipeline that have been doing this for years and really don't try to make a strong statement or opinion out of their list. I think they're just trying to do and they do a more traditional list. Sure. I'll call it where you don't see Kate Povich, but. That being said, I think it was 11 different Oriole minor leaguers that made somebody's top 100 list.
Crazy.
This might be the deepest I've ever seen any farm system.
Really?
Maybe not the top end talent that some have had since Adley graduated, but from 1 through 15, it's unbelievable. So I guess the question is, do people understand how much work went on behind the scenes with Elias and Sig to really start from nothing? And player development, I do not think is getting the credit for taking these guys that are drafted and actually molding them, as opposed to taking a guy who's drafted and taking away a pitch or hurting them.
Go a step further, where think at the major league level, and then you got guys, like Grayson about to come. Just the Duquette holdovers that have. I mean, Cedric Mullins is the poster boy for that. Just developing.
Grayson Rodriguez, people forgetting Adley Rutschman were Duquette draft picks.
What was that? Sorry.
Adley and Grayson were Duquette draft picks. People forget that.
Adley
was drafted by Duquette. Wasn't it?
Elias's first pick.
I thought it was Duquette's last, but I could be wrong.
I think Grayson was the last, because I think that was 2018,
and it was DL Hall the year before. It was DL Hall and Grayson.
DL Hall and Grayson, correct?
Yes, we're both Duquette. Yep. Yes. So to give him credit is fair.
Yeah, and no, but it's a great point where I think people knew that, like, okay, their analytics were nothing. I'm sure you saw. God, it's frustrating, man. I can't think of the podcast. I just saw it this morning of Grayson saying, like, dude, from when I first got there to now, just like the pitch track and, just like all this crazy stuff. What they did when this thing was nuked to the ground and they built it up, zero international presence. I mean, now you got Sam Basalo
in analytics.
Yeah, one person analytics. I mean, you have Basalo in the top 30, but I believe that's the only international kid.
And he's underranked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another one of Jason's boys.
They all are. They all are.
We had Matt Blood on, and he's like, asking about,
Right. Jason's got a 58-man roster. I think he's confused the Ravens and the Orioles.
Yeah. But to have this list with like barely any international guys on it is remarkable, and it just shows like the cavalry's still coming. And for the Baseball America top 100, where it was 7 of the 8 guys that they had were in AAA, the majors, and the one exception was Jackson Holiday. So it's not like, oh, okay, it's still a couple years. Like, no, these guys are ready to break through now. And are all of them going to debut for the Orioles? No. Are they all going to pan out? Like you said, no. But from what they've done, to zero analytics, to the player development was shoddy, and the international market was non-existent. The Dominican Academy is like getting built up right now.
And by the way, I want to give a shout out to Kobe Perez. I don't think people know how highly regarded he was when he came over, and he hit the ground running in a terrible situation where we were behind probably 2, 3, 4 years in the international market. So just want to give a shout out to the work they've done.
Dude, they would give away slot bonuses as like throw-ins for drafts. I didn't care.
Yeah. So I called up here, and hopefully you can see this. And if you're listening on the audio version, well, you should be listening on the YouTube version if you want to see. But this is the Orioles roster off of Fangraphs, or projected roster. And what I wanted to just show, and I know this might be hard for you to see, Tim, but if you look at their projected starting lineup, you have Mullins drafted, Rutschman drafted, Gunnar drafted, Santander Rule 5, Mountcastle drafted, Urias waivers, Stowers drafted, Hayes drafted, Adam Frazier, who may or may not actually be a starter, is the only free agent. Now, if you go to the projected starting rotation, Kyle Gibson free agent, Cole Irvin trade, Kyle Bradish trade, Dean Kramer trade, Grayson Rodriguez drafted. To me, if people haven't gotten the hint by now, we're drafting hitters and trading for pitchers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
and again, the one guy that was drafted,
right?
Dan Duquette.
Yes.
So,
and I mean, I don't want to say he got lucky, but top 10 high school pitchers are a risk. So good on Grayson, and good on our player development for him.
Goes back to that.
But look, I mean, clearly we want to. I mean, and we will be forced to trade some of these hitters. That's the plan. If and I think a lot of fans don't realize these guys are drafted to trade.
Oh my God. I say it all the time, where prospects are assets, where they can be assets to your major league roster. They can be assets in a trade. They're kind of like lottery tickets. And the more of these guys that you have at the better values, instead of like the $1 scratch offs where it's like impossible to win. And then maybe you buy like a $20 scratch off where you have a better shot at what, like, it's that kind of thing. And
other teams would rather trade for the $20 scratch off than the $1 scratch off.
Exactly.
And that's a great, I'm stealing that example.
You got it. But now it's getting to the point where your system is overflowing with talent. And like I said, we had Matt Blood on yesterday, a director of player development for the Orioles. And, I asked him, I said, was that a moment where you traded Darryl Hernandez to get Cole Irvin? Like, it's go time. And he agreed. And he was like, look, we did a great job developing Darryl. And, I think he's going to be a player, but it is exciting that we're at this point now, and that's going to be the first of many more to come. Because I feel like a broken record. Not all these guys are going to play here. It's just the numbers game, and you look at filling out Norfolk's roster. Like, I mean, it's getting to the point where you're kind of blocking guys and keeping guys down. And
so here's my new favorite game. I was on a podcast, which I respect tremendously. They do great work on Oriole minor leagues. And I was a guest, and I posed the question to them, name me out of our top 10 prospects, 3 or 4 that you would trade. And they couldn't come up with 3 or 4 that they would trade. I said, well, prepare yourself. I mean, like you got to get into this mentality. The guys are good, but the guys are good to be traded.
Yes.
Hernandez was good, but Hernandez might have been our fifth best shortstop.
Yeah. Yep.
And that doesn't mean he's not good.
Yeah.
But it means we're getting Cole Irvin back. We're
yeah.
not getting Corbin Burns for him.
Yeah.
And we got to accept the fact that Cole Irvin's better than some of what we have. And that's just an upgrade to the team. It doesn't have to be a number one starter. Yeah. So I just wanted to touch on that because we're running out of time and I want to move on. And the last thing I wanted to touch on very quickly, because I know that you have not talked about this at all, is Orioles and Ravens ownership. And I'm going to make a slightly different point here. Sure. I think both clubs suffer from a similar problem in that they have the world's worst self optics and self PR problems. And that their biggest issues could be cured with better self-marketing and better communication with the media. And I think a lot of the or a lot of the uproar or some of the stuff with the Lamar or the Ravens or the Orioles family situation, a lot of it I just think is transparency and involuntary transparency. They shouldn't have to have their arm twisted in an interview or by a writer. I do believe that ownership, if you're going to have conversations, just be honest. And I think the fan base could accept almost whatever the answer is in both situations. The Ravens can come out and say, this is a tough situation. The market changed on us. Lamar knows that. We know that. And that's not breaking news.
No.
But this seems to be this, both organizations want to put up a wall. And I think it's that wall that gets fans more upset than the actual conversation. So just from that standpoint, I'm staying out of all the other stuff you normally talk about. Is there some truth to that? Am I off my rocker more than usual?
No, I think you're 100% there. I mean, we'll start with the Ravens because you mentioned it, just the transparency. Last time aside, when he talked at the owners' meetings, when he said a lot of weird stuff, I always enjoyed Steve Bisciotti meeting with the media every year. I found him to be very insightful and going back to your word, transparent. And I could rattle off multiple times where maybe even too honest to a fault where he said that he considered firing John Harbaugh. He put Cam Cameron on notice and Joe Flacco. And I remember Billick.
And the fans accepted all that.
Yeah, no, I think you like that. I think that's I loved hearing Steve Bisciotti talk, and his last true State of the Ravens presser was following the 2017 season.
What year was that? Repeat that. His last
2017.
And we're in what year now?
2023.
Okay,
he did the thing with the core four and the owners meeting last year. I'm not counting that. 2017 was the last time he did a true press conference. That was prior to Lamar being drafted, and that was when he said that he considered firing John Harbaugh. Now, as far as John,
Angelos, Orioles,
yes,
representative owner.
It's just it frustrates me because I'm like in that really crappy age where the Orioles have been terrible for the vast majority of my life. Where,
by the way, if you're listening to this on audio, Tim is about 17 years old.
I'm 27. So born in 95. Orioles went wire to wire in 97. So I'm 2. So needless to say, Danny, I don't remember that. So then
I lost my virginity before you were born.
So from 98 through 2011, you're in the 14 years of consecutive losing. In 2011, I was in 11th grade. So for my entire childhood, the O's were terrible. 2012 through 16, awesome. Then they sucked. After that, blew the team up in 18 and the rebuild, and now they're back to being good again. So for the vast majority of my life, they've been terrible. I say this because they were the feel-good story last year. They were like, no one saw it coming. Vegas projected them for 12 wins, and they're blowing past that. And your Adley's up and Gunner's up, and it was such a fun team, and just all of the walk-offs and close wins. And then you have the lawsuit come out, and it's like, well, damn it, why can't we have nice things? And then like you just keep having.
But doesn't this speak to the transparency again? Like, we don't need to know the details.
And that's
yes, we're having,
And that's where I'm getting at. So then you go to MLK Day, where Conley asked John that question, and
I'd like to say it was a coincidence that it was an MLK Day, and that question came up. That question was not related, and I think MLK Day was used as an excuse. If you don't want to say it before the story, I will.
Absolutely, without question. And John, all he needed to say was, "Hey, we're not taking any questions on that right now. You did not need to berate Dan."
Or 30 some owners would have my head before the books were opened.
He said that out of emotion, but I don't know. And then, of course, the lease yesterday, 2 days ago, they did not do the 5-year extension.
I actually agree with that, because
I don't. Here's my opinion. I didn't live. I was far from being alive in 1984 when the Colts left. I know the story. If I lived that, oh my God, that would have gutted me. But I understand why some may feel that way, and just the internal strife in the Angelos family.
The Ravens lease is through 2040.
What was that?
Like that. The Ravens lease is something like 2040.
2037, they got 2 5-year options.
Okay, so as long as 2047.
Yes.
And the Orioles turned down a 5-year lease that lacked development and other things to improve, much less in time for that 5-year lease.
No, I get it. But my thing is, don't you want the $600 million? Like, don't you want that?
Yes, and they didn't qualify with the 5-year lease. It had to be longer.
But I'm with you. Don't you want that as soon as possible, though? Don't you want to not let this drag out? And they don't care. And they just signed the 2-year lease extension too. So, like, I don't understand why there's so much dragging their feet. That being said, they aren't leaving. There's a 0% chance they're leaving. I am not buying any of that BS.
And I'll answer your other question. The Masson lawsuit, especially with the court date having been known before it went public. There is so much money on the line in that date. I think that every other financial decision is going to hinge on that Masson lawsuit. I don't care what anybody says.
No, I mean, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I guess what happened 2 days ago is just pouring gasoline on the fire of cynics, of everyone
that gets back to my transparency conversation.
Yeah.
They knew more than 2 days ago that this wasn't going to happen.
Absolutely.
So why not come out in advance?
Yeah.
And say,
yep,
because we wouldn't qualify for this, because construction on a thing would take 2 years and we'd only have a 5-year lease. We want, to make sure we can enjoy, this with our fans for many years. Just like our friends and neighbors, we want to keep this, sports section together for decades to come. I mean, there you go.
I don't disagree, but
I don't hire a effing person to tell you to keep your foot out of your mouth, or to when to connect with your fans. Is Baltimore. I mean, this is in a lot of ways a city that you have to treat differently, and the Angelos family. And, I'm going to go as far as Steve Bisciotti should know Baltimore well enough that people want to talk. We don't want somebody in the 24th penthouse floor looking down. I mean, that's not Baltimore. So that's my passionate plea.
No, I completely agree with all of that. And
Well, you should. I'm right.
you're always right, Danny.
Yeah.
But no, and the sad part of it is it going to change? I mean, I don't see Steve talking more. I don't see John and the current ownership kind of changing in that style.
Here's my prediction. Steve talks when the Lamar situation's resolved.
You better.
Without a doubt, however it's resolved, we're going to hear from Steve, whether it's this offseason or the end of next year, again, with what happened.
He needs to.
The Orioles situation, until the Masson is resolved, is going to be pretty tight to the vest. Because of the family lawsuit and the Masson money, and Masson technically being a different entity than the Orioles, it gets very messy with some of the financials there and being in court. So I think they're going to be careful what they say publicly until that's resolved. But I think we'll hear a little bit more after that.
Well, when do you expect the lease to get resolved? I saw what Jeff Barker said they want it by mid-season.
They don't have to until September or July?
December 31st.
That's when it ends. There's actually a cutoff date for renewal that I think is before that.
Oh, okay.
Now it's not till I want to say the end of the baseball season. I mean, it's not imminent.
Yeah.
October. So that I think that's why they're shooting for the All-Star break. Mm-hmm. Also, don't forget the Orioles have continued to make a push for the All-Star game, and a lot of people have pointed out that the Masson dispute has cost them the All-Star game. The Masson dispute hits court in March. If that is resolved and the Orioles can make an all-star announcement about a new lease, the ownership situation seems clearer. All of a sudden, we get to go into the all-star game, hopefully with a competitive team and somebody who looks very good to host a future all-star game and a young stars. And I think whether or not the Angelos family keeps it in the current ownership state or it's rearranged in the family or whatever it is, I think it's only in their best interest to have the asset be as valuable as possible. And people forget that. Devaluing the Orioles doesn't help anybody. So.
Well, the All-Star thing's a joke to begin. So 93, that was when they had. I've never seen an All-Star game, like my whole life.
I was there. I have my ticket right over there.
I would love to go to the All-Star game when it comes back, and it should have been back forever ago. But like you said, the Masson. Oh my gosh,
those were my seats from the game.
Those are massive tickets.
And not only that, if you see the background forms a picture of the clock tower.
That's cool. That's really cool.
We got the ushers to not separate the tickets for us so we could frame it, and it centered the back picture perfectly.
That is awesome. That is really cool.
Yes, that's one of my favorite pieces by far, bar none. I've had that since 93, if I don't break it now. So I won another All-Star game here. I was there when Griffey hit the warehouse. I was there when Juan Gonzalez hit the facade on the upper deck in left field, which, by the way, was just as impressive. All right, Tim, we've gone way over. This is what happens when somebody's used to doing 6 hours.
Yes. I just talk. You got to tell me to shut up.
No, I'm just as bad. Are you kidding? I don't think we've ever done breakfast in under 6 hours. So thank you for coming on. I'm going to throw you into the green room. Enjoy the blue M&Ms for 2 minutes, and I'll join you in a second.
Sounds good.
Say goodbye to everybody. Guys, we got a Baltimore episode in. We're going to do more of these. I know Tim said this is a slow time of year in the offseason, so we can try to take a little bit advantage of that going into NFL draft, spring training. Very exciting time to be a Baltimore sports fan. So this was a blast for me. I hope you enjoyed it. Audio and video always available at Sports Balt, and I don't do outros. See you.